Welcome back to English Evolution. I am Bella, and today we are talking about something very real. Something that happens to everyone when they start working in a new place.
And I am Rick. And yeah, today we're talking about making friends at work, which sounds simple, but in another language, it can feel uncomfortable at first.
Exactly. Because it's not just about speaking English, it's about starting conversations, reading people, and feeling confident enough to be yourself.
Yeah, and I think that's the hardest part. Not the language itself, but not knowing how to begin or what to say in those first interactions.
So tell me, after your first few days at work, did you start talking more with your coworkers?
Yeah, slowly, but it didn't happen all at once. It was more like small moments that started to build into something bigger.
That's very natural, because friendships usually grow little by little, not in one big conversation.
Exactly. At first it was just simple things, like asking questions about the job or how things worked there.
What kind of questions did you usually ask in those early conversations?
Things like, how long have you been working here? Or, is it always this busy during the week?
Those are great questions, because they are easy to answer, and they help keep the conversation going naturally.
Yeah, and I noticed that when you ask simple questions, people feel more relaxed and more open to talking.
And it also shows that you are interested, which is very important when you are trying to build connections.
Yeah, people can tell when you are really listening, not just waiting for your turn to speak.
Did you have any awkward moments at the beginning when you didn't know what to say?
Oh yeah, many moments like that, especially when I didn't understand something and just smiled.
That's very common. The classic smile and nod strategy.
Exactly. But after a while, I realized that it's better to just say you didn't understand.
Yes, being honest makes communication much easier and more natural.
So I started saying things like, sorry, I didn't catch that. And that really helped.
That's a very natural phrase, and people usually respond very positively to that.
Yeah, they would just repeat what they said or explain it in a simpler way.
And that creates a more relaxed and friendly environment for both sides.
Exactly. And I think that's when I started to feel more comfortable speaking.
Did you start having longer conversations after that point?
Yeah, little by little, especially during quieter moments when there was less pressure.
Those moments are perfect for building real connections.
Yeah, because there's no rush, no stress, just normal conversation happening.
And what kind of topics did you usually talk about with them?
Simple things like food, music, where we're from, and what we like to do on weekends.
Those are perfect topics, because everyone can relate to them in some way.
Yeah, and it helps find things in common, which makes conversations easier.
Did you find anything in common with your coworkers?
Yeah, actually we talked about music, and that helped a lot because we had similar tastes.
That's always a great way to connect with people.
Yeah, and once you find something in common, the conversation becomes more natural.
And less forced. Did you start feeling more confident after those conversations?
Yeah, slowly, because every conversation gave me a bit more confidence.
That's how it works, step by step.
And I stopped worrying so much about making mistakes.
That's a big step in becoming more fluent.
Yeah, because when you stop worrying, you start speaking more freely.
And that's when your real personality starts to come through.
Exactly. Instead of sounding like a textbook.
Yes, nobody wants to sound like a textbook in real life.
And people connect more with personality than perfect grammar.
That's very true.
I think that's when I realized that making friends is more about being real than being perfect.
That's a really important point, because people often focus too much on grammar and forget that connection is what really matters.
Yeah, and I think once I understood that, I stopped putting so much pressure on myself during conversations.
Did you notice a difference in how people reacted to you after that?
Yeah, I think people started to see me as more relaxed and approachable, and that made them talk to me more.
That makes sense, because energy plays a big role in communication.
Exactly. If you look tense or nervous, people can feel that, even without words.
And when you are relaxed, conversations tend to flow more naturally.
Yeah, and I also started asking more open questions instead of just short ones.
What do you mean by open questions?
Questions that invite longer answers like, what do you usually do after work? Instead of just, do you go out?
That's a great example, because it gives the other person more space to talk.
Yeah, and then the conversation becomes more interesting.
And it also shows that you are genuinely interested in the other person.
Exactly. And I think that's when people started opening up more with me.
Did anyone invite you to do something outside of work?
Yeah, actually, one of my coworkers asked if I wanted to join them for a drink after work one day.
That's a big step, because that's when the relationship starts to move beyond just work.
Yeah, and I felt a bit nervous at first, because it's a different kind of conversation outside the workplace.
Yes, it becomes more personal and less structured.
Exactly, but at the same time, it felt like a good opportunity to connect more.
And did you decide to go?
Yeah, I did. And I'm really glad I went because it made a big difference.
What was the atmosphere like outside of work?
It was much more relaxed. We were sitting down, having drinks, and the conversation felt more natural and less pressured.
That's usually when people feel more comfortable being themselves.
Yeah, and I noticed that I was speaking more freely as well.
Because you were enjoying the moment instead of worrying about your English.
Exactly, and that changed everything for me.
What kind of topics did you talk about in that situation?
We talked about our lives, hobbies, travel experiences, and even funny stories from work.
Those are great topics because they help people connect on a deeper level.
Yeah, and I felt like I was finally getting to know them as people, not just coworkers.
And that's when friendships really start to form. Did you still feel nervous speaking English in that situation?
A little bit, but much less than before, because I was more focused on the conversation itself.
That's a very important shift.
Yeah, I realized that when you focus on communication, the language improves naturally.
And that's how fluency develops over time. Little by little, conversation by conversation.
And each experience builds your confidence.
Which makes the next conversation easier. Looking back, what would you say was the key to making friends at work?
I would say being open, asking simple questions, and not being afraid to be yourself.
That sounds like very good advice.
Yeah, because people connect with who you are, not with how perfect your English is.
That's a very powerful message.
Yeah, and I think more people need to hear that.
I think many learners put too much pressure on themselves, thinking they need to sound perfect before they can really connect with others.
Yeah, and that pressure actually creates distance instead of connection, because you're not being natural anymore.
Did you notice any change in your confidence after spending more time with your coworkers?
Yeah, definitely. Because the more I talked to them, the more comfortable I felt, and the less I worried about mistakes.
That's exactly how confidence builds, through repetition and real experiences.
And I also started recognizing the same phrases people use all the time.
Like what kind of phrases?
Simple things like, "What are you up to later?" or "Are you working tomorrow?"
Those are very common and useful in everyday conversations.
Yeah, and after hearing them a few times, I started using them myself.
That's a great example of how listening helps your speaking improve naturally.
Exactly, because you're not inventing sentences, you're reusing what you've heard.
And that makes your English sound more natural and more fluent.
Yeah, I started to feel like I was speaking more like them.
Which is a very good sign of progress.
There was also a moment where we were all talking about weekend plans.
That's a very common topic. What did you say?
I said something simple like, "I'm probably just going to relax and maybe explore the city a bit."
That's perfect, simple and natural.
Yeah, and then someone said, "You should come with us. We're going out."
That's a great opportunity to connect more.
Yeah, and at first I hesitated a bit because I wasn't sure if I would feel comfortable.
That's very understandable, especially in a new environment.
But then I thought, this is exactly the kind of situation that helps me improve.
And did you go?
Yeah, I did. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions.
What made it such a good experience?
Because the conversation was relaxed, there was no pressure, and I could just enjoy the moment.
And that's when language becomes something natural, not something stressful.
Exactly. I wasn't thinking about English anymore. I was just communicating.
And that's the point where fluency really starts to develop.
Yeah, I think that moment changed how I see learning English completely.
In what way?
I realized it's not about studying more. It's about using the language more in real situations.
That's a very important shift in mindset.
Yeah, because real conversations teach you things that books can't.
Like tone, timing, and how people actually speak.
Exactly. And also how people react and interact.
Which is a big part of communication that many learners don't focus on.
Yeah, communication is much more than just words.
It's about connection, emotion, and understanding. So, if someone is listening right now and feeling nervous about making friends in English, what would you say to them?
I would say start simple, be open, and don't wait to be perfect before you speak. Because the more you speak, the easier it becomes.
And the more natural your English will sound. Step by step.
Conversation by conversation.
And over time, those small conversations start to build something much bigger than you expect.
Yeah, because what starts as small talk slowly turns into real conversations and real connections.
Did you notice when that shift happened for you?
Yeah, I think it happened when conversations stopped feeling like effort and started feeling natural.
That's a very clear sign that you're becoming more comfortable,
Exactly. And I stopped thinking about translating everything in my head.
which is a big step towards fluency.
Yeah, because now I was reacting instead of translating.
And reacting is what real conversations are all about. Did you start feeling more like yourself when speaking English?
Yeah, that's actually the best way to describe it. I started to feel like myself again.
That's a beautiful moment in language learning.
Yeah, because at the beginning, it feels like you're a different person when you speak another language.
And over time, that gap slowly disappears,
Exactly. And you start expressing your personality more naturally.
which makes it much easier to build real friendships.
Yeah, because people connect with who you are, not with how perfect your English is.
That's such an important message.
I think a lot of people wait too long before they start speaking,
Why do you think that happens?
because they're afraid of making mistakes or sounding wrong.
But mistakes are part of the process.
Exactly. And without mistakes, there's no progress.
Every mistake teaches you something.
And every conversation makes the next one easier.
That's how confidence grows.
And before you realize it, you're having full conversations without thinking too much.
And even making jokes.
Yeah, that's when you know you're improving.
When you can joke in another language.
Exactly.
So, if someone is starting a new job and feeling nervous about making friends,
Start small, ask simple questions, and just be present in the conversation.
and don't try to impress, just try to connect.
Because connection is what really matters.
And everything else comes naturally after that. And remember, everyone feels nervous at the beginning.
You're not alone in that feeling.